These are the very tracks that brought internees to camp. They're still used today. It took 4 days and 3 nights to get here from California. The quarters were cramped. It was especially difficult for elderly and children. And the entire way, the window shades were drawn. The internees were not allowed to look outside, and they had no idea where they were going.
We were so tired. All we wanted to do was go to sleep.
Toshi Ito remembers the exhausting trip from Los Angeles. She was just 17 at the time.
We arrived in a sandstorm. Yeah, dirt and sand was just flying all around, you know.
In the middle of that storm, she remembers walking into the one small room she would have to share with her parents.
Some of the windows wouldn't work, and my father tried to close them because the sand would blow in, you know, and our door wouldn't close.
She would soon discover one of the most scarring parts of life there was the bitter cold.
The first winter, I'm told, was 38 below zero.
The poorly constructed barracks had no insulation. The wind would penetrate through the spaces between the wood slats. Each family had a coal-burning pot-bellied stove that often caught fire. That cold made living there that much more humiliating.
If you wanted to use the bathroom, you had to go outside. If you wanted to go to eat at the mess hall, you had to go outside.
Inmates were forced to bathe in communal showers and use public restrooms with no stalls. Toilets simply sat out in the open. And the food was awful. Something out of a can slopped onto rice. But food eventually ended up being a bright spot in Toshi's story. One of the inmates, a young man named Jim, just graduated from college with a degree in agriculture. Jim studied the land, tested the soil, and realized with hard work, camp residents could grow their own vegetables. He told them what to plant and where, and the results were remarkable.
They supplied the mess halls with fresh vegetables. He had a root cellar dug so that we could store our root vegetables, and so we could have fresh vegetables to eat all winter long.
This is the entry to the root cellar. Oh my God, this is so amazing.
That root cellar still exists. I explore it with Shirley Higuchi.
You know, humans are resilient. They figure out a way.
It was built underground, hundreds of feet long. Erosion has taken its toll, but it's still clear it was an impressive achievement.
He was so proud of that root cellar because he said it was so big we could drive a truck in it.
Toshi knows so much about Jim and his accomplishments because he ended up being her husband. They met in camp and married at the end of the war. Together they had 2 children, Chrysalin and Lance. Today we know him as the Honorable Lance Ito, the judge who presided over the O.J. Simpson trial.
It was an unpleasant memory for my mom and dad, and they chose not to discuss it.
It wasn't until he was a teenager that he began to realize the extent of what his parents went through.
You know, the first part of the internment was going to the assembly centers at Santa Anita, you know, at the Pomona racetracks, things like that. And my mom would tell me about living in horse stalls that had been cleaned out, but you could still tell that obviously it was a horse stall. The internment experience that my parents and grandparents went through does impact my life today.
Today, if you look around his courtroom, you'll see his tribute to his family's struggles, like this painting of the mountain by an internee from 1943.
To remind me that that's the sort of thing that can happen if we're not paying attention. And we need to pay attention every day to maintaining the rights that we have as American citizens.
And this photograph of the enormous camp, 10,000 people who had no opportunity to defend themselves in court, to prove their innocence, American citizens who were denied their Fifth Amendment right of due process.
It's part of the speech that I give to jurors that they're here to be part of a jury trial, and that the right to a jury trial is an important right that we have as Americans.
For Judge Ito and his mother, there's a deeper understanding of what the denial of our rights cost. After being released from camp, Toshi's parents went back to L.A. and were met with hate. Even their grocery wouldn't sell to them because they were Japanese.
So my mother had to take a bus and a streetcar and go near Chinatown and hopefully pass as a Chinese woman to buy our groceries.
She recalls how neighbors put up a sign saying "No Japs" and would throw tacks onto her parents' driveway, hoping to puncture their tires.
The people in the neighborhood just hated us.
Before the war, Toshi's father worked hard to build their life.
He was very successful. He sold insurance in the Little Tokyo area.
But after camp, people refused to hire him.
The insurance company wouldn't reinstate his license or, rehire him. He tried doing physical labor, but he just couldn't do it.
Not being able to provide for his family left him desperate.
And so he committed suicide. He finally figured out that if he committed suicide, my mother and I would be taken care of because she would get the the money from the insurance.
It happened when Toshi was a newlywed, on her honeymoon. She received a call that her father was sick and she needed to come home. She remembers stepping off that train and being told what really happened.
I just started to cry, and I went to my mother and I hugged her and I said, "I'm so sorry," And then when I got home, I went to his bed, and on the side he slept, and I just lay there and I cried, and I could smell his hair tonic that he wore, and I never cried so much in my life.
I pay tribute all the time to the memory and what they went through to survive that experience and give me the kind of freedom I have today. It's hard to pay people back for that because in reality you can't. All you can do to pay them back is to keep the memory alive and talk about the story.
It's a difficult truth for a prideful country to swallow. Even our own history books often shy away from this chapter, hesitant to show what Americans did to other Americans.
The fact that you could take a whole group of people identified only by national origin, order them from their homes, and hold them in a very desolate place for an indefinite period of time is a violation of due process of law. It's a violation of your right to have a trial. It's a violation of so much of our Constitution. And that somebody needs to stand up when those rights are violated.
I don't know that I would have done as well. I just don't. Excuse me. They came out of it. They worked their way through it. They were able to just pick up and go on with their lives. I don't know, in a similar situation, if I would have come out and been a whole person after that.
This beautiful mountain holds the recollections, the images, the remnants, stories of people forced onto this rugged land against their will, and then, at the end of it all, given $25 and told to go back to a home that no longer exists. Heart Mountain brings us lessons from a time of great fear, where a country known for fiercely fighting for individual rights did just the opposite.
It's wonderful to be patriotic and wave the flag. Unfortunately, sometimes that flag can knock people over.
To order a DVD of The Legacy of Heart Mountain, please visit heartmountainfilm.com. All proceeds benefit the Heart Mountain Wyoming Foundation. We're dedicated to preserving the legacy of one of the most profound chapters in American history.